Okay, it's time for truth. How many of you are motivated to go to work? No, you can be honest because I know you're there listening to this podcast and you're probably by yourself. And it's a genuine question. I've asked this a couple times on the show. How many of you get excited about going to work and dealing with people? Right? You can't avoid it. You're listening to this show because you're in human resources. It's important to you that you love your work, but how many of you are actually motivated? And then once you've answered that question, can you honestly say that your employees are motivated themselves? You're listening to the Human Resource. My name is Pandy, and my guest today, he believes that 8 out of 10 employees don't like their work. No, and I'm going to let him explain himself. Today I've got John McCarty. John's the author of The Purpose Promise. And he also just followed that up with The Purpose Partner, completed in 2021. 2 books that very concisely help employers and companies understand that what you were doing to motivate your employees 10 years ago, it isn't going to work anymore. John?
Pandy, great to be here.
Why would you be so motivated to focus on this yourself?
Yeah, well, it comes from my path, my vocational journey, and what I've learned through stewarding a recruiting firm. And so when I launched a recruiting firm, we were growing that firm, and the success of growing it, getting many people jobs, sounded really good. But what we realized is that people were coming back very quickly to us and saying, oh, this job's okay. What else you got? And this was managerial level and up. And so it begged the question, well, are we really transforming people's lives by getting them jobs or better jobs? And that's when just this nagging passion started to develop for me about really understanding what we call the new psychology of work and how to help others understand what the psychology of work looks like today so that employers and leaders can start reframing what employee motivation looks like to hopefully move the dial on motivation and helping people love work again.
This is not industry specific. This isn't educational specific. I mean, anyone who has a responsibility in human resources, anyone who manages people should be considering this.
Oh, absolutely. And this is bigger than just business. This is a humanity issue. If you're in human resources, you're probably in human resources because you care about humans, right? That was probably a driver, right?
We would hope.
Absolutely. And, we look at business as obviously an opportunity to fuel our economy and our livelihood, but at the crux of it, it's about people. And that's why we're on this podcast today. And if people are getting up and they're a cog in the wheel of productivity for an employer, for an organization, we're missing the reason why that business exists. And so we started to peel back the onion as to what real motivation looks like in current circumstances. And there's a lot of theory that's very outdated about what employee motivation is and what it isn't. And obviously, the last 3 years have really accelerated some of the things that we saw coming from an HR perspective. And now we are in a completely different work world. And a good friend of mine always says, when the music changes, you have to change your dance.
I may use that.
Mm-hmm, please.
I may use that. We talked on the show a while ago how the younger generation is now more concerned about their impact and the value of the company, their employer. My generation never even thought to ask that. We just got a job because that's the way it was supposed to be. Our success was wagered on how much we made and what our titles were. What are you finding now in regards to how do we keep employees employed, retained?
Yeah. Well, let me answer that with a little history, if we can, to just kind of dissect the day we're in. If you go back into our economy and the labor force, to the agrarian economy, work and the motivation of work was really based around, creating a better community, a better family, obviously on the farm. And then the Industrial Revolution changed human motivation and labor motivation. And I'm a big fan of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, we're in the sixth turn of it right now. But what it did was it made efficiency and effectiveness king in business. And what that has done over time is it's squeezed out the purpose of an individual. And this new generation is leading a new wave around purpose. And obviously it's a buzzword. We've written a couple books on it. Mm-hmm. But to your point, they're looking for meaning, and they're looking for integration of their whole life with their work life. And so to retain the next generation of the workforce, and quite frankly, we've sat in meetings before that are multi-generation, and the younger generation starts to talk about how they want to integrate their best life into their work life. And then we see the older generation say, you know what, I think I want to do that too. So it's not just about retention of the younger generation. I believe that this is sweeping through all multi-generational workforce, that people want to understand who they uniquely are first and foremost, and that's what we kind of call purpose of life. And then they want to find work that's going to calibrate to that life. And so we see the ploy for flexibility and autonomy and drive and purpose and all these different things that have been buzzwords of the past. But because of the last 3 years, we've all questioned, why are we here? What is our existence? Mm-hmm. And that's brought about, I think, an existential question that we're all seeking the answer to, that is now core to retention of employees.
And that's why so many people are reinventing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeking that satisfaction internally. You mentioned in your presentation when you and I met that money is no longer a driving force. Mm. How are employers supposed to adapt to this new mindset?
Sure.
when they're driven by money? It's all about numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do we or do we start with CEOs? Where do we start?
Sure. Well, it's all about reframing questions so that people can understand how money leads to happiness in their own individual life, not adopting the view of somebody else, because that is going to lead them to a hollow path with a destination that's not unique to themselves. So let me get it. That was obviously very high level, 10,000 foot. At a very ground level, motivation of money is not changed. Money is the greatest motivator for employees once it meets an individual's needs. Once it exceeds their needs, its motivational capability is greatly reduced, and intrinsic motivators are much greater. So the key point to that equation is, how much money does an individual need? And the beauty of this season we're in is people are starting to ask themselves questions based on how they want to live, not necessarily how the world has told them they need to live, which was at one point, make more money and you'll be more happy. Mm-hmm. That ideology is out the window. So if employers are just throwing money at the problem of employee turnover, they're most likely going to have tough results.
And that's what they're doing.
In a lot of ways.
And I cannot tell you how, and I have a word for it, but I should do it on the show. It's not working well. It's not working well, and employers are feeling like they're being held hostage because they can't seem to get their arms around it. You kind of had a scale a little bit. You said job satisfaction. Once we reach job satisfaction, they are more engaged. Mm-hmm. And if we've got them engaged, they move then to better performance. Am I getting this right?
Sure.
My notes are
Absolutely.
Good. And then once the performance is good, they're happy?
Yep. Yeah, so, first off, helping people uncover who they uniquely want to be is a necessary component to job satisfaction. And that is a new philosophy.
Yeah, that doesn't even reword that.
Sure.
So our viewers actually grab hold of that.
Yep, absolutely. So What's really low right now, Pandy, because of the last 3 years, and it was declining before that because we're in the age of information. We're no longer in a knowledge information or era, and we're definitely not in a wisdom-seeking era. Information basically is thrown at us, and we tend to psychologically believe what we consume. And has happened is people are sick of that because what they're seeing out there is not leading to joy-filled life. Mm-hmm. So they'll basically pursue something that the world will tell them that they should be, and then they reach a destination. Hopefully it's not to the midlife crisis. Hopefully we can get to it earlier. And then they start to ask the right questions of themselves, and they gain greater self-awareness. And so when we think about the psychology of seeking joy in this season of life, we realize that employers can be catalytic to help their employees go on a journey to seek that self-awareness so that they can then find what their unique metrics of success are, and then employers can partner with them in the obtaining of that success. That is foundational to job satisfaction. And so the hard part of this, Pandy, is most business leaders did not get into business to be psychoanalysts.
That's right.
Right? And though we need to adapt new abilities to lead well in a season where people are questioning life, they're questioning who they are, and they're questioning what they want work to be. So employers, because of the labor shortage and because of the gig economy emergent and the next generation preferences, they need to adapt, or else they will continue to throw money at the problem and see poor employee retention results.
Well, and what's interesting too, and I want to really stress this. This is going to take an individual, either in that HR role or in a leadership role, to really have the emotional intelligence to not preconceive any notions, but to sit back and have the patience to listen and allow that individual to kind of evolve through the process. Because most employees don't realize that they should be doing this. They are doing it. They're struggling with it because it's not comfortable. It's new. But it should be something natural as well. And each individual is going to have different results. And we've got to allow them to do that.
That's right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to retention and culture anymore. And that is a daunting fact. And I think most leaders that are listening to this probably would agree with that. But what do you do with that? Because the reality is, in a lot of ways, we're ill-equipped. I think what we have right now is a leadership crisis because over the last 3 years specifically, we've been so busy managing, right? We can manage projects and we can manage budgets, but leadership at this level requires exactly what you said, a ton of emotional intelligence, and it also requires a big investment of time. And with that investment of time, guess what? There's also opportunity cost. Yeah. And this is a season, if employers are going to adapt and really look for the long-term retention and performance strategy, they have to think that now I need to invest in people in new ways in order to have a workforce of the future that is going to be high performance.
I think the number one person that needs to really take a good hard look at their own happiness and satisfaction is the owner. And I'm saying that trying to be nice, but if the owner isn't happy, and if he's trying to do something he was never meant to do, and we both have met them, they're really good at making the product, but they're not good at leading. They should not be running a company. Put somebody else in that role. Tuck and hide your ego. Go back to, I've got a trucking company, and so help me, the owner would rather be in that truck making cross-country deliveries than to be at his office running the company. So he's taken other family members and doing that, but he's happy. He's happy. And thank goodness he was smart enough to just say, you know what? I got the right people in the right role. We have to be comfortable enough to allow our employees to go through this process because some of them may not stay with us. We may be kind of cutting our foot off to spite ourselves, but at the same time, they're going to go anyways.
That's right. That's right. And Pandy, I think your example about the trucking company is a good one. And I think we're actually in a place of a major crossroads in business in general. And that is that for the last 3 years, there's been an incredible amount of burnout. 75 to 80% of us would raise their hand and say we've been burnt out. And I don't know where the other 20% are. I'd love to meet them. But this last few years, I think what we have been experiencing is that so many leaders that were in a position of leaders were leading in what the quadrant that we call unconsciously incompetent. And I hate to say that. Look, I'm just going to call out, this is a tough one.
Oh, I'm glad somebody's finally doing it.
Yeah. But here's what's happening right now. I think we're seeing people say, I am consciously incompetent of running my business in this new psychology of work. And so I need to think differently. And that's good, because change management will say we have to hit that moment of realizing we can't do it the same way and expect different results, right? And so what we see, and I'm sure you see as well, and I think the whole HR community sees, is, okay, I think we're ready to adopt new strategies so that we can actually see new results. And that is foundational and critical to move into this next generation of managing labor market well.
How do you bring in new clients? How do you work with companies?
Yeah, well, most off what we do is we educate and equip. And so just with that unconsciously incompetent reality and people moving to, okay, I'm consciously incompetent and I know I need to understand the new psychology of work, we come around the executive team and really lead them into understanding the new psychology of work, and then give them processes and tools, because it can be daunting when you share this information. I mean, some of these sessions wherein we can feel the heaviness in the individuals that are so prone to an old way.
Yeah.
And then it's, okay, well, let's just walk with you into the new way and provide the processes and tools and templates so that they can actually execute within their organization and start seeing results.
That fits exactly with one of the mantras of this show, is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because change is the only constant in the universe, and the pandemic taught us that, and we are not going to escape it. And it's time. It's time. Your program boasts 10 new motivational approaches. Can you just touch a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah, well, it's really highlighting the way we used to think and the way that we need to start thinking. So looking at these top 10 new psychological realities of the workforce is a key component to then figuring out, what do I do with this, and what's practical, what's the first step look like, and what's the long-term vision of this look like.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing, even in just taking one or two steps towards the new realities, what it does for an organization. And it's inspiring, Pandy. You know, like we should be in business to help people understand their best selves and be able to help provide a path to that.
We should be.
Correct.
Let me add that operative term. We should be. But we both know a number of companies that aren't focused on that.
That's right.
And some never will. We have to be intelligent enough and sophisticated enough to say that this is not going to fit everybody. But to your point, then will they be here in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, Pandy, I'd say that for every business leader that's really listening to this and wondering what to do with it, they need to ask themselves, what am I in business for? And if I'm in business to make profit, then, good luck trying to overpay and retain employees. But if you're in it to change lives, you got to change the way you're looking at employees. So
start now, listeners and viewers, start now thinking about this. If you know how miserable you are going to work, what do you think your employees are going through? And here's the simple truth. You now have 2 resources. The Purpose Promise and the Purpose Partner, written by John McCarty. John, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. PurposePromise.org or PurposePartner.org is where you'll find us. Or on LinkedIn, John McCarty. Just connect. Let him know you heard him on the podcast, and he will be more than happy to give you more information. Because you've been listening to The Human Resource. Take care.